Let's zoom in on Infosys. What's really going on with Infosys? So exit after exit after exit. Mr. B.G. Srinivas, who was considered to be the front runner, if Infosys were to pick a CEO from within the company, Mr. Srinivas was that man. He's put in his papers, effective the 10th of June. What next for Infosys is the question that we are asking. And to help us answer that question, we've got TVS Mohandas Pai, Chairman, Manipal Global Education Services Private Limited. Needs no introduction. Almost synonymous with Infosys. Has held a variety of positions, management positions in the company. And by the way, was also one of the early ones to get out, quit the company. Bhavin Shah is joining in as well from Ahmedabad. He's chief at Acquirers Capital, but he's also a veteran IT analyst. And I'm sure, Bhavin, you interacted with Mr. Mohandas Pai when he was running Infosys in various capacities. Thanks very much, both of you. Thanks for coming in. Mr. Pai, let me first ask you, what really is going on?
Thank you.
Because we don't have clear answers.
No. I think what is going on is that the CEO search is taking too much of time and people are anxious and worried about their future. And you had a 3-year time when the company did not do well and the board did not act. So I guess when you have very high quality talent which is very anxious and is not very sure about the future, they get grabbed by somebody else. Ashok has become CEO of a company, I guess, is enjoying himself. Bala has started his own fund. And I guess BG must have got a very good offer and decided that the offer is better than waiting for the company to decide what is what. Because when you have a CEO search, you got to be very decisive. You got to work fast and complete it incredibly fast. I think it's gone on too long. And the prolonged time for a new CEO and a proper structure and a proper communication is creating despondency in people. But the sad thing is, all the 3 people who elevated to the board in June of 2011 are all gone now. And the board, I think, has to talk to shareholders and tell them what exactly is happening in the company, tell the shareholders what is their plan and how they're going to retrieve the situation before it becomes much more critical.
Chandrasekhar Kakal has also taken over recently as COO at, I think, L&T Infotech. That also came through.
Yeah.
So what you're saying... So what you're saying is this is fabulous outside opportunities which is actually luring them out of the company, and also internal frustration of not knowing what's next.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing, because you see this whole issue of the founders running this company has run this course for far too long. And I think the board should have stepped in and stopped it some time ago. The board did not. The board went along with the founders, and I think they have not done justice to the company, and they have to answer to the shareholders. And now it is blowing up because the next generation is not going to wait long. When you have a merit-oriented company, then you reserve the position only for the founders. And when some founders fail, you do not take action and do not hand over the seat to somebody else. When you appoint people to the board, and they're extraordinary people, very talented, they're capable of running large companies anywhere. And let's not forget that Infosys has fabulous people. The entire senior management team, entire management team, great depth, is very, very good. You're seeing them do very well when they go outside. And you do that and don't take a decision, and you try to be protective of people who are not done well because they happen to be founders, and create a class structure, people will leave. And that is what has happened. And I feel very sad that this great company which sets standards in this country, and where all of us worked very hard to build it up, and we were very so proud of it, this country was proud of it, is now languishing because of indecisiveness at the top. Secondly, I think when the market changed after 2008, 2009, the internal structure of the company should have changed to reflect the marketplace. The market is now more determined by the quantity of sales. It is much more market-oriented rather than delivery-oriented, rather than ability to deliver. So you need a structure inside which empowers people to take decisions and not makes people go to a centralized body of people who decide what the pricing should be, what the margin should be, etc. The people in the front should be empowered. And I don't think the empowerment happened when the 3 people were elevated to the board. They carried on in the same way. I guess it did not work. And lastly, I think communication between the top and people there is just not good. I think when Murthy came, he should have communicated better. He made some unfortunate statements which has demoralized people. And when people become insecure, they're not very sure, they will leave. But I think you can still retrieve the situation if you act very decisively. So I'm very, very hopeful the company will restore its greatness.
BG Srinivas, Chandrasekhar Kakal, Bala, Ashok Vimuri, Basa Pradhan.
Ashok.
We've all grown up watching Infosys with a lot of admiration, right? I mean, me personally as well.
Yes.
So it's kind of sad to see. And in my limited understanding and capacity, somebody like Ashok Vimuri, I mean, I thought was CEO material. So when you said that it had a great bench of people, I mean, is it had a great bench of people, or you think it still has internally great quality of CEO potential candidates? What's your view? Or you're not too familiar of the people there now? Yeah.
It has a great quality of CEO material, but they're not ready. For example, you have a Manish Tandon, you have a Sandeep Dadlani, you have a Sanjay Jalona, you have a Ravi. They're all great people, and many others are there. They're all great people. But please remember, they have been running units. They don't have experience in the enterprise. They require at least 1 or 2 years to come up to enterprise and manage a very large, complex company. Please remember, every 3 years, Infosys was a different company. It's an extraordinary company, grew so fast. Every 3 years, a very different company in a highly competitive environment. So you require some kind of a understanding of the enterprise and working there, and you have to be fully empowered. And I think that's what was missing. Empowerment has been missing. It was far too centralized. It did not change the empowerment model everywhere. But this is true of most Indian software companies. And many others too, I think in future will have similar challenges because they're too dependent on a single person, are too centralized for decision making. So models have to change, and that's where I think these companies are being caught up short. But the next layer too is pretty good. It's very, very good. You're not seeing them or heard them, but they're very, very good. I only hope others don't poach them and take them away and give them CEO position in many other companies.
Let me get in Bhavin as well. Bhavin, is it fair to say that had it been any other company but Infosys, right? Of course, Infosys with Mr. Narayan Murthy at its helm, with this kind of sort of exits, the market would have been very unforgiving. One can argue and say the stock has been down and it's not done as well as other IT top tier companies, but I think it's still gotten a very long rope. Would you agree with that, Bhavin?
Well, yes, Infosys is still priced for growth. In other words, it's still priced like a growth stock. So if there is further question marks on growth coming back, then yes, there is definitely more room for correction. And I think the other aspect is that if you look at it from a cash flow perspective, Infosys is the best in business as far as generating free cash flow, whichever way you look at. So I think investors have that track record to look at. And I think there are some investors who are very patient, and they do believe that this is that tough period and company will come out of it. So that's why they are, basically sitting tight. But ultimately, it is priced for growth. So if the question marks continue to persist on future growth, then there could be further derating.
Yeah. So even you, I think, Bhavin, reflect the market sentiment. I'll tell you an anecdote. I was at Infosys. I think this was not the January quarter, but the quarter before that. And my focus again was about top management exits, etc. After the interview, I got a call from a fairly large institutional money manager who I respect, and we do share ideas and talk to frequently. And he was, jumping up and down. And he just said, "Well, why do you have to focus so much on management exits? It's a great company. It's generating a lot of cash. It doesn't matter." So you're saying exactly that, right? So it doesn't matter. It's still a great franchise. I don't dispute that. But the effect of what has happened with all these people sort of streaming out, I mean, it's got to have an impact, which might show up now, which might show up later. Or the other way to put it is that the recovery which people have been talking about will happen in fiscal 15 or 16 gets pushed out to 17, fiscal 17. And in the meanwhile, while it fixes its core, it misses out on large opportunities elsewhere, business opportunities.
Of course. I mean, I think, in fact, we have been saying for last, several months that this, exits are affecting Infosys' ability to grow with the clients. clients are not willing to give more business to Infosys. In fact, if you look at the June 2013 survey that was done by our Offshore Insights, for the first time, the number of clients were thinking about reducing business with Infosys. So, those indications were already there before Murthy arrived on the scene. And I think what has happened in the last 12 months, in fact, we already see it in numbers. If you look at March quarter revenues, it was definitely a soft quarter. So we are already seeing it in the numbers. And, in fact, I would say that the guidance for FY15, the risk is that company misses that guidance, because of this churn that is happening.
Mr. Pai, come in here. So, it's a tough kind of choice, right? If they pick a CEO internally now, they risk a spate of more resignations. If they pick somebody from outside, he'll take time to actually understand the business as large as Infosys, a company as large as Infosys, settle in, and then start to really perform. Would you agree with that assessment? So it's kind of a Hobson's choice.
No, I think it's not a Hobson's choice. The choice is very clear. You have to get a CEO and a COO. I'm very surprised for 3 years there has been no COO. It's not possible for one person, a CEO, to run the company. Right from 1999, there has been a COO. Sadly, in 2011, they forgot that they had to have a COO, did not appoint a COO, and created more confusion. They should appoint a COO. And if the board takes a bold move, appoints a CEO, whether from within or outside, and a COO, and empowers the team, and gives it a very clear mandate, people may leave, but it's all right. I mean, it's all right. The new team is come. The new team is going to work hard and get things done. And some people who are unhappy will leave. That's perfectly fine. And the company goes on and they talk to the clients and start cracking again. It's perfectly okay. This indecisiveness, this long time of saying we are searching for a CEO, we are doing this, we are doing that without any feedback, people leaving in between and the people doing this. I mean, this is what is hurting the company. It's hurting morale, it's hurting the people, it's hurting business, it's hurting the clients. So there has to be a decision. And I think in the next 1 month, the company has to decide. And the board has to take a hard call and decide and work fast. It cannot be a prolonged action like this. We will decide, we will tell you, we will do this. I mean, you've got to decide. I mean, the stock is languishing. If you look back 3 years, right from 2011 till now, the stock has not gone up. Many companies have doubled, tripled, profits have gone up, the stock has not gone up. The shareholders have been suffering because of lack of indecisiveness, lack of decision making by the board, and this kind of incompetence at the top level with the board not doing anything, and this long, prolonged search for a CEO, and a lot of discomfort for people. So I think they have to decide, and they have to decide very fast. It's the job of the board and the chairman to decide, and they have to step into the plate. And I think as shareholders, they have to demand that a decision be taken. So I think there cannot be forgiveness from anybody for indecisiveness in a very large, complex company where there's so much at stake. There is billions of dollars at stake, the lives of hundreds of thousands of people at stake, and the board is just not acting. And that's what it is. It doesn't matter whether people leave, but you need to decide, we need to get along and close.
Mr. Pai, what's your sense? How is Mr. Narayan Murthy seeing all of it? Because I think he, being at the helm, provides a lot of comfort to people. You know him personally. You've also, a lot of people who have left are your peers. You work with them. What's your sense? Nobody is doubting that they weren't doing a good job, but one can argue and say that the team as it was, because of maybe internal or external conditions, wasn't performing up to the mark. And the only way to sort of compare that is to say, compare it with the TCS, which picked up the pace at which it grew its business while Infosys wasn't able to do that. So in that sense, there was underperformance. Would Mr. Murthy, as you know him, be very worried about all the people who have left? Or he'd be still very confident of sort of turning this around?
I think he has to get more worried. I would expect him to get more worried. Let me say this. Murthy has to resolve the conflict within himself of his loyalty to the company and his obligation to the company. First, he has a loyalty to his founders and obligation to the company. He first has an obligation to the shareholders and the employees of the company, and then loyalty to founders. He's put the loyalty to founders much ahead of his obligation to the company, and that confusion has to go. He has to decide very fast that he has to invest in the future. The company has an extraordinary set of people. He has to empower them, invest in them, and go along and let the past go by. You can't keep the past hanging about and then screw up the future. I mean, that's not possible. That's totally wrong. I mean, I had expected when he came to be decisive, like he was much earlier when we knew him. But I guess much water has flown down the bridge. So he has to decide. This loyalty to founders, vote taking, the obligation to company is hurting the company's prospects, hurting the shareholders of the company, and hurting the employees of the company, and giving a bad name to such a great company. And I think this has to be resolved immediately. So, you have to take steps. You have to have a CEO. You have to clean up the board and then get along.
You mentioned the founders sort of running the company, and that's gone on for too long. Would you say the decision to appoint Mr. Shibulal as the CEO was a mistake? Now, with the benefit of hindsight,
I wouldn't say it is a mistake in a way, but the decision not to empower the 3 people who are appointed on the board and allow them to run the company is a big mistake. Remember, you had 3 people who are appointed to the board: BG, Ashok, and Bala. By any stretch of imagination, they're extraordinary people, fully capable of running the company on their own. You should have empowered them. When a founder became a CEO and the founder has only 3 years, the first thing you should have done is to empower them and make them run the company, and put them in the front, so that knowing very well that among the 3 of them have the capacity to run the company. Now, if you don't empower them, don't make them feel good, don't push them in front, and don't push them hard and give them the targets and hand over the reins of the company, and stay on to mentor them and to do brand building, everything else which you must do, then it's not going to work. And that's exactly what happened. And it resulted in the chairman being called back by the board, because I guess the board panicked at the response of the shareholders to what is happening. And sadly, the same thing continued without there being a decision. I think this has to be settled. To me, that's the most important thing for the company. I know I'm making strong statements before everybody, but I feel very sad. The company where a large number of people spend the best years of their life giving everything to the company is going to such tough time because of indecisiveness at the top. There's nothing wrong with the company. The next level are all the companies got extraordinary people, great processes, like Bhavin said, great cash flows, clients are great clients, and it's got a great brand name. It's just that the top has to change. It has to change fast, decisively, and that the chairman has to resolve this conflict immediately. The board has to resolve this conflict, and then I think we're back to stream.
Mohandas Pai and Bhavin Shah are with us, and we've been talking about what next at Infosys with Mr. BG Srinivas on his way out. Thanks for waiting, both of you. Bhavin, I want to come to you. What are you expecting from Infosys? Because many are reading it to this event to mean that the announcement of a new CEO is imminent now. It might happen very soon. And that's the reason why Mr. Srinivas has moved out, once he's understood that he won't be the person running the company. Is that the correct interpretation? And the second part is, the stock has lost about 1,000 odd rupees or so, right, from its recent high. What kind of growth, revenue growth, is it building in at about 2,900 rupees?
Well, on the first one, yeah, it is. It is a good. I mean, it's a reasonable conjecture that Mr. BG Srinivas is no longer in the race for the CEO's position. However, from that, it's difficult to conclude whether the company is close to announcing, the new CEO candidate, because the external search process, as I understand, only started about a month back, and it takes a long time, to complete that process. So. We would like to see that announcement come as soon as possible. I mean, like tomorrow, in that sense. But it's hard to imagine that that's going to happen. So that is on that part. And as far as what is the share price factoring in, well, I think at this levels, I think there's no one number, but I would say that something like 10 to 12% growth over next 2-3 years is what is kind of getting priced in now. Anything, that's a dollar growth I'm talking about, and then obviously stable margins is what I think is getting priced in. Anything, if growth deviates from then, accordingly you can think of revisit the share price. But I think once again I would say that we are estimate of about 201 rupees EPS for FY15. So we are still talking about close to 15 times FY15 earnings. So we're still talking about a premium to growth, and that premium is there because there is still a hope and belief that company of this quality can stage a turnaround.
Yeah, no. So 2900 is building in 10% growth, dollar revenue growth, or are you saying that you are still expecting 10 to 12% growth, while the stock now is assuming much lesser growth, and hence there is a variation?
No, see, assuming something like 8% growth in FY15 and 11-12% in FY16-17, we come up with a target price around 3,000. Okay. So that is what I mean by the share price implying some growth. If I do a compound annual growth over 3 years, it will work out to about that 10% kind of a number.
Right. Mr. Pai, you yesterday on another channel said that Mr. Nilekani has a responsibility, moral and otherwise, to come back to steer the company back. Do you really believe that is possible, or there was just comment made as the news was breaking and you said, well, I mean, you just said it, or you really meant that?
No, I really mean it, because it is let's understand, it's a founder-driven company. That's the reality of life. All the founders have taken turns at being CEO. That means they kept other people out for 30 years. So it's a founder-driven company. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. They're perfectly fine. And now it has not worked. And the next 2 generations of people are left. And since 94, I can tell you 4 generations of people are left because the founder-driven company. They never saw any chance of being at the top, despite rhetoric to the opposite. So now that the company is constrained, the company is not doing well, and I think, and there's a gap in the top. There's a gap in the top because the entire layer is gone after Murthy has come back. I think Nandan has an obligation as a founder who has done well for himself in the company, and the company has given him so much, to come back for the next 1 or 2 years, handhold, help Murthy make the transition, because he has an uncanny ability to connect with the clients. The biggest challenge the client is facing is connecting with the clients and revenue. Sadly, in the last 1 year, NRN has gone on cost optimization at the cost of revenue growth. Revenue is the biggest thing. If revenue were to grow faster, all the problems will disappear. Utilization will go up, profitability will increase, people will get more compensation. Is an upward spiral. So you've got to focus on revenue growth instead of cost optimization. Sadly, they've been focusing on cost optimization. And if Nandan were to come back, he'll focus on revenue growth, make the connect with clients all over, re-energize the sales force with a fabulous salesman. And I think if he does that, and he has an obligation, a moral obligation, because he's benefited so much for the company, he still has a large stake. And for 2 years, come and handhold and help the next CEO rebuild everything else. That'll be fabulous. That's why I said that, that's required, because NRN coming back doesn't seem to have worked to the way that it should have worked. There have been some wrong calls taken in terms of only focusing on cost optimization.
Right. Are you in touch with Mr. Nilekani? Would he be inclined? Or
I don't know. I'm not in touch with Nandan, because I just met him 6 months much before he decided to contest the election, and I guess he's a little bit unhappy about with me. On the election issue, so he has not spoken to me.
Right. There's also this wild speculation of Rohan Murthy assuming a larger role, and he sort of, also running things de facto in that sense, and that leading to people being frustrated and things. Any truth in things like that? I mean,
I don't know. I don't think there's any truth in that, because he was very clear that his job was to stabilize the shape, put it on the growth path, get in a new layer of leadership, mentor them, and move on. So I don't think there's any truth in that, because the challenge for
I met him on the sidelines of the last quarterly update. I had a long chat with him, and that's exactly what he said. He actually said he intends to go back to study once, the job here is done. That's what he wants to do. One last question, Mr. Pai.
You can't expect a 68-year-old person who has been away for 10 years to come back, recreate the old magic he had at a much different time, when he had 2 layers of people below him to translate what he said into action. Please remember that. Those 2 layers are gone. The biggest challenge is the 2 layers of people below the board are gone. And that's the big challenge. So whatever he decides, to translate that into action and to get things done, you need a set of people who work with him, and the gap is too wide. And that's the big challenge. And that's why I think, his role has to be transitionary. And that's, I think, exactly what he wants. I mean, he's not a power-hungry person to come back.
Very quickly, I'm being told to...
You must...
Yeah. No,
you see,
got that.
He's under tremendous stress also. You must understand that.
Yes. The one last point, the CEO nominations committee has Mr. Kamath, has Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw and R. Sheshasai, all fabulous people, well regarded in the industry, but none of them have a IT services background. You think that will be a problem?
No. They're highly competent people, and I'm sure they'll do a good job.
Got that. Thanks very much, both of you. I'm being told to wrap out of time, but it was great chatting with both of you. Always a pleasure. Mr. Pai,
Thank you.
Bhavin, thanks for coming on.